Morning, Bill.
Good morning, Mark. Another podcast. Looking forward to. We've got about 4 or 5 more leading up to the new year,
And then we'll have a break.
That's right, exactly. Well, it's been an interesting 4 days, hasn't it? Because it's been, or actually, judging by the traffic this morning, there's no tradies around Geelong. I think it's a 5-day break, and boy, does that cause havoc for a lot of small business operators.
And it was interesting, like visiting around my habitat of Ocean Grove. Very busy on the Sunday, dropped away on the Monday, which is traditionally a really busy day because people make that the extra long weekend. And then Tuesday was okay. But yeah, I just don't think people are out spending money still. I think it's still sit at home type time.
Anyway, life goes on, and we've got to live with these holidays and just get on with things. So, Mark,
but before we do, Bill,
yes.
they're a very important day today. When by the time this goes to air, we'll know who's the president in the USA. And I've turned off the telly. I'm sick of listening.
I've got a coin here. Do you want us to toss a coin? And along the same vein, I was reading some early results from the Geelong Council elections this morning. So that'll be interesting as well, yes.
So this morning, we're sitting in a very nice, cool underground chamber, if that's the word.
Old bluestone walls looking around, I think, by the looks of them.
In the FyansPaper Mill vicinity with Libby, or should I say Elizabeth, but we'll say Libby, Bell from Elizabeth Bell Ceramics. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for coming.
Yeah, and now, Libby, I've been stalking you on LinkedIn like I do everybody else.
Oh, no.
And your website.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by you've got an interesting journey on how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure.
So it'll be good to listen to this. And I think there's a few tipping points, Mark, along the way to get here.
And I like sitting here because Elizabeth won the Geelong Business Excellence Award for Micro and Home Business.
That's right, yep.
Which was a great first year entry.
Second year entry.
Yes. And where we're sitting doing this interview is where I'll declare that we sat here as judges interviewing Libby and surrounded by clay and wheels. And anyway, we'll come to that later. So, Libby, where was primary school?
Montmorency, which is like northeastern suburbs of Melbourne, so out near Greensborough kind of way. Yep, so grew up there, went to Monty Primary, Monty High, spent most of my child life there. I went from high school into a hairdressing apprenticeship when I was about 17 and, completed my hairdressing apprenticeship. And then obviously ended up in Geelong somehow. So met a lovely boy in around about 2006.
So what brought you down to Geelong? What was the move?
Just not doing the V-line anymore, not travelling anymore. Okay. So Jordan and I met the year that we both started year 12, and then he went on to go to university at Deakin. So in the end, I ended up moving down to Geelong. And worked a couple of years down here as a hairdresser. And then we've always used Geelong as our little hub. So lived in Geelong for a couple of years. Then we went off to the US for a year where Jordan went to university there and I worked. So
what did you do there?
I worked in a restaurant. It was like right in the middle of the GFC. So it was just like any job you could get. Yeah. There were people with like master's degrees going for coffee shop jobs because it was just like no jobs around.
And trying to live on tips.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think my hourly rate was about $7.50. Yep.
And you smile lots to get.
Oh, totally. Tips. So I sort of hosted like a restaurant for a little while, and then we lived in California for 6 months, and then we went over. It was amazing, so great. And then we moved over to DC for another 6 months, and I ended up getting a great job at the UGG boot shop. UGG Australia. So they basically just used me for my accent, put me on the door. I had to say g'day as everyone walked in, and it was very cliche.
G'day, mate.
G'day, yeah, pretty much. But it was a great job. It was just retail. So, but it was hard to do hairdressing there because it's all based on commission, and I obviously didn't have a clientele. And I was kind of a bit like over the hairdressing thing by that point as well. Then after the States, we came back to Geelong, and I worked in like a hairdressing wholesale. So it was still like in the industry, but not the hands-on kind of role, and really enjoyed that. So I started off as a manager at West Coast Hair and Beauty Supplies, and that was great for me. I was like 23, but had a management role, and I learned a lot in that job. It was like challenging, but I learned a lot from the owners and everyone I worked with. And then at the same time, we went through the whole process of getting married. And then on our honeymoon, we went to Japan, and that was definitely my turning point moment that you talk about. So we were just walking through the hills, up in the hills in Kyoto, and there was a little old guy doing pottery classes, and I just thought, yeah, I'll give that a go. That looks like fun. And 10 years later, here we are. It's of escalated from...
Here we are in a dungeon in the old water mill or whatever, paper mill in Geelong.
Yeah, that's it.
So, as you said, Mark, surrounded by pottery and wheels and
Clay.
and got a great retail shop upstairs too, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Japan's fantastic for ceramics.
It's the best. It's stunning. Yeah, so when we went for our honeymoon, it was more about like travel. I wasn't really into ceramics, but I'll absolutely go back and just do a tourism holiday based on all the different potteries that I can go to. So I look forward to that one day.
We were in Tokyo probably just as COVID started. We flew back in on March and
then
place
it was
shut
all
down.
over. Yeah.
And the multitude of shops and the intricacy of the designs, but there's all very clear different makers.
Styles, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, it's really
good.
interesting.
They're very creative.
But Libby, after that, as I read here on my mobile phone, that was in Kyoto, correct?
Yep.
And then you had a couple of similar experiences in India and Turkey.
That's right. So
and an internship in Oxford in the UK.
So from that moment in Japan where I had my first class and I was they basically did all the hard work for you, but just that being like quite mesmerised by the wheel and finding it like quite relaxing and meditative sort of thing. So from there, when we got back to Geelong, I enrolled in a term class, kind of like what I offer now, and I did about 3 or 4 terms. Then we ran away and went travelling again. So then we backpacked for about a year all through Southeast Asia and China and India and Nepal, and just anytime we sort of got to a town, I just Googled like pottery classes in that town, and I just tried to like do a little workshop here and there. I ended up doing a week-long intensive class with a lady in India, which was great. So just that like everyday practice just made like a really big difference. And I think also learning from lots of different people has given me tips and tricks and created my own style where I've sort of picked like little bits from that artist or bits from that artist and going, that's an efficient way to work, or I like the way they move the clay with their hands that way.
So Libby, just on that, have you got a signature style, as I call it? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I would say it's like rustic. I work with like a really speckled clay, and I would say my glazes that I make myself, they're all my recipes. They're all very like Australian earthy is what I would think. So I've got like a really beautiful like rusty red, which kind of reminds me of like an old oil drum that's all rusted out, or there's a beautiful oil drum up in the garden here that looks kind of similar to the glaze. I've got a beautiful green that's very eucalyptusy. I do have some pinks, which, are in nature, flowers and things, but I just like them because they're a nice colour.
and so with your opportunities around India, Japan, etc., and making ceramics there, is there anything specific that you picked up from there that you didn't know here?
I probably picked up the most when I did my internship in the UK. So once we had done our travelling and we had run out of money and we needed to settle somewhere, we decided to settle in London, mostly because it was the easiest place to get a job for both of us, for Jordan and I. But the pottery classes in London were just like ridiculously popular, and the only class I could get into that had availability was like £600 for a 6-week class, which is just out of control. So I was like, okay, I can't afford that on my London wages. So I found a weekend-long class out in Oxford, so only an hour from London. And we went up there for the weekend, did a bit of a touristy thing. I went and did pottery during the day and just, got along really well with the lady who was running it, and she ended up offering me an internship. So then what I would do was I negotiated with my boss in London if I could still do my full-time job but within 4 hours, because I needed the wages because it's so expensive to live there. And then I would go to Oxford one day a week and just hang out with this lady, train off her watch how she makes every day. And then in the evening, she would give me lessons. So she was quite strict on me, which I really enjoyed. So she would say, all right, here's your challenge. Let's say it's like you get a kilo of clay and you have to make it 10 centimetres tall. Cut it in half, see where you've got excess clay, do it again. And I did that for about 6 months. So I didn't keep a single thing that I made in my internship. I just practiced the whole time. And I feel like that was a game changer in forcing myself to get better rather than just producing product, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the famous, you have to do 10,000 hours, Bill?
Yeah, that's it. To become a master.
To become a master?
Yeah, that's right.
There's the book, and I can't think of the name of the
was
book.
that Michael Gladwell, I think?
I've read it. It's a great book.
I'll think of the name.
It talks about Bill Gates ticking the box on the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So, but that's almost what you've done, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. And then, so she taught me lots about mixing my own glazes, which is quite... people that come to me and say, oh, how do you get started with that? It is overwhelming because you're like, where do I start? But yeah, she was very helpful with that. She would tell me about business, teach me about, how she's making it like a viable business to run. She was also teaching classes at her studio, which is obviously great cash flow because they're pretty consistent on most weekends. So just learning all those little things off her was like really valuable. And then from there, I got a wheel off Facebook Marketplace, put it in our bedroom in London, and I just would finish my full-time job, go home, and I just practiced like every night. I was borderline obsessed with it, that I was just like, I just want to get really good at this because I really love it.
But that's a good learning, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You've got a passion for something and you practice.
Totally.
Practice.
Yeah.
Michael Gladwell was the book
Gladwell,
we're talking about. He's got 3 books, The Outliers,
That's it,
The
The
Tipping
Outliers.
Point, and Blink, and you should read all of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
They are fantastic
So
books.
good.
But Libby, I also noticed that you did a Cert 4 in small business.
That's right. Yep.
Now, I have a particular opinion about that
Yeah.
program because I used to teach it at Northern Melbourne TAFE and at Vic Uni TAFE.
Yep.
And you'd get a class of say landscapers. And at the beginning of the year, you would ask them how many people are going to, this is final year students in the diploma, how many of you are going to start a business next year? Nearly all the hands would go up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the end of the year, of course, there'd only be half the students left, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would ask them how many are going to start a business, and one hand went up. And the really interesting thing was, having done that Cert 4 in small business management, they realised that you've got to run a business, you've got to know how to run a business.
Yep.
And it was a great lesson in, it's not all about your skill, it's about managing a business to make it work.
Yep.
And hopefully that's probably what happened to you to get started.
I did get a lot out of the small business course. I was also doing that at the same time that I was working at West Coast Hair and Beauty, and I feel like I got a lot of knowledge from there as well. And also when I worked in London, I was managing 2 different salons across 2 locations. And my employer there was also very open with how her business runs and all those kind of things. So I think I've had a lot of people that have been happy to like mentor me along the way.
Accidental mentors.
Yeah, for sure. And to be open about business as well, because I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people that won't tell their staff how much money the business is making. They don't want to share that information, which is totally fair. But along the way, I've had some really great people help me and explain why, this is working or this isn't working, that kind of thing.
That's good.
Yeah.
So just since you've opened this business here, I guess what's the biggest business lesson you've had to learn from when you opened to where you are today?
From opening the business or opening just here?
No, just opening. Oh, yeah, let's take it here in this studio and retail shop you've got.
Yeah, I think from moving into this place, I've basically gone from like me and maybe 1 to 2 staff members or contractors who are helping me out teaching the classes to we've almost got a team of 10 now. So it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot different in managing the team, the roster, that everyone's on the same page. So things I've put in place to help me manage that is having a bookkeeper help me with wages and liaising more with the bookkeeper and the accountant to make sure I'm doing everything correctly as well. That's probably the biggest thing at the moment.
Mark, I don't think the AI has learned how to operate a wheel at the moment.
No,
to do pottery.
I'll be right for a little while.
So how can, I guess, IT help your business at all, or if at all?
Probably, well, what I was looking at the other day, so leading up to Christmas, so now is my like crucial point, like the stock that I'm making in the next probably 2 to 3 weeks is about as much stock as I can make to have it on the shelves by Christmas Eve or the weeks leading up to. So I was using my Square system to see, like mugs, for example, I have 2 different sizes. So when I was making the mugs, I was like, which one do I actually need more of? So I looked at my previous year's worth of sales and worked out that I sell significantly more of the large ones. So that's what I focused on last week, was making sure I had more large mugs on the shelf than small. So that's probably how technology helps me in that particular way. I did also this year change from QuickBooks to Xero, and I find Xero really clear to read like what's happening, all the ins and outs. I've quite enjoyed that. And then also my bookkeeper just logs in, does what she needs to do. I just have to approve it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's good. And do you have a mentor now?
I don't. That's my goal for next year. I'd really love to get someone just to have like a monthly catch up and almost in the way that like the Geelong Business Awards is really helpful for you to reflect back. Almost do that in a way where you're doing it like monthly or quarterly and just taking more time. I think sometimes I get too caught up in the making and the business that I don't take enough time to reflect back on how far we've come in the last month, what's been working, what hasn't, that kind of thing. So, I think if I had more of like a regular catch up with someone, then that would make me more accountable to be like telling them what's happening. Yeah.
So going back, your pottery wheel was in your bedroom in London.
Yes.
So when did you get back to?
So we got back to Australia in 2019, so August 2019. Yep. I was 20 weeks pregnant with my daughter Quinn, who's now almost 5. So it was kind of one of those moments where it was like, do I get a job or do I just give this pottery thing a crack and see how it goes? So I was lucky enough to get a couple of teaching jobs at different studios in Melbourne, so like Northcote Pottery and Sarah Shembry. So that was great for my cash flow. I had like 2 or 3 classes organised each week, so that was enough to keep things ticking over. And then my lovely dad gave me a double garage in his bus yard in Coburg. So that was my first studio. You think this is a dungeon. You should have seen the first one. It was rough. And it
rustic.
Very no natural light. All it had was a roller door. Like it was pretty rough. But Dad did a great job. There used to be a mechanic in there, so he like acid washed all the walls and the floors down and tried to pretty it up a little bit for me. Didn't even have running water, so I had to like go out to the garden tap. No hot water. I had to boil the kettle if I wanted warm water to throw with. But it was a great start and it was free rent, so thanks, Dad.
But it got you started.
Got me started, yeah. So then from there, we rented in Fitzroy and my studio was out in Coburg. So I did that. I had my first I had about 4 months of making until I was ready to go onto like a proper maternity leave. And then, had our little girl. And then kind of COVID happened. So I was sort of on maternity leave, but also not really able to work anyway because I couldn't travel to my studio. So kind of just like enjoyed that time off. I couldn't really do it any other way. Then when I did decide I wanted to go back to work, we got put into one of those like snap lockdowns, and I just decided like, I have to get some making done. So we actually brought my wheel back from Coburg so it was back in the spare bedroom. So we had a 1.5 bedroom apartment in Fitzroy, and poor Quinny, our daughter, got kicked back into our room. I took over her room and turned it into like a very small pottery studio. But it was just enough to keep things ticking over.
So were you selling online? Is that how you were trying to...
Yeah, I was selling online, and also I started, had a couple of wholesale orders. So I had a coffee shop.
Okay, that's where it started.
Yeah, I had a coffee shop in Melbourne that needed 50 mugs. So I was like, I'll get this done, even though we were like in and out of all these lockdowns. But I said, I'll get it done. And then so from Fitzroy, then we decided that we wanted to buy a house, and one of the prerequisites of the house for me was to have a studio that I could work from, just because we were so uncertain about, am I going to be able to get a studio? Didn't really want to work off-site. I wanted to work from home. So then we were looking various locations, but we found this great little house in Geelong West, and it had a studio out the back. So we bought that and moved back to Geelong at the start of 2021. And the studio was a little bit bigger than a double garage, but it was enough to get 4 wheels in. So I expanded and bought a couple of extra wheels, and I thought I'll start doing classes in Geelong, and they just went crazy. Like, they were just so well received here. I think people liked the small class sizes. It was very homely, very welcoming. We started off, I think the first term I released 8 spots. So that was me doing 2 nights of 4. Then I got a friend who was a potter. I got her to come and teach a night. So then, we went up to 12. And then the demand just kept going. So I put on another night, got another teacher to do another night. We ended up doing 4 nights. So we had 16 students, but that was kind of the capacity that we could have at that small studio. So I always knew I was going to outgrow that space, and it certainly had its benefits being at home. And we also have had another baby since then in 2023. So while like Jack was really young, it was great that I could just pop out to the studio at night once the kids were asleep and just, I could make 20 bowls and then do like a limited release online. So I would just do what I could, cut off most of my wholesale for a little while just because it was too hard to keep up with that demand. And the classes only stopped for 1 term, but then I had one of my team members, she kept the classes running while I was on maternity leave. And then when little Jack was only 2 weeks old, this lovely old bluestone building in the FyansPaper Mill came up for rent on realestate.com, and we thought, it's not the...
Is that where you saw it? Were you looking, or did it just happen?
I've always been looking, yeah. Okay. But it had to be the right property, and it had to have character. I didn't just want a concrete box. It had to so much character. It had to be interesting. It had to be beautiful. I wanted like brick and trusses, and it had to have a soul as well. So I think this place definitely...
In other words, it had to be derelict.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we did paint over some graffiti over there.
That's a big move.
It was a huge move, and it was incredibly overwhelming. I had a 2-week-old baby, and we were deciding, is this the right building? Are we going to invest money into the fit out because it needed a lot of work? I was incredibly overwhelmed by the idea. It was definitely my husband Jordan who was the driver of expanding out here, and he's an architect, so he can see the potential in this kind of building. Where I was like, sleep deprived with this tiny little baby and a toddler that I was chasing after. I was just like, it's too much work, and I was looking more at like the size of the shop. Like, it's quite big. It's bigger than my whole last studio. I was overwhelmed by like, oh my God, I have to make 1,000 pots to put in there just to fill it, to make it look good. But the timing all worked out really well in the end. So Jack was born in March. We looked at this place in March, and then we did the back and forth with council to change the use of the building, and then also the back and forth with negotiating the lease. So we didn't actually get the lease until November 6th, which is today. So it's our 1-year birthday here of our lease. Yeah.
And you're an award winner.
And an award winner.
Yeah.
So then we took about 2 months to renovate it. So upstairs we put in some beautiful internal doors, because we just have this like barn roller door. So it was like totally open to the elements. And if it rained, the water was just rushing into the studio. So we took about 2 months to renovate it. And then we started operating out of here in January this year.
So come till today, how many classes are you running now?
So now we're running 56 term students per term. So we've gone, even though we've only doubled the wheels, we've put on a lot more extra classes just because we have the space for storage for the students. And then annually we'd probably see about 700 students come through for taster classes. So they're just like the one-off, come and give it a go. Yep. Usually the gateway drug to pottery gets everybody in,
And do you run hens nights or
we run nights? So all of December is pretty much booked up just for end of year team buildings or Christmas parties. So we're doing quite a lot of them here. We've got a couple that we're collaborating with Providence Wines, which is... So I can have up to sort of 10 or 12 people in this studio, but anything bigger than that we do with Providence.
And Libby, 7th to the 8th of December.
Yes.
There's the Geelong Ceramics Market.
That is
at
right.
Little Creatures. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is our 3rd year running for the Ceramics Market. So the Ceramics Market interestingly stemmed from the year that I was pregnant with Jack. And I thought, I don't want to travel. All of the good ceramics markets were all in Melbourne. And I thought, I don't want to travel to Melbourne when I'm 7 or 8 months pregnant. Why don't we bring why don't we bring one here? Why don't we start a ceramics market in Geelong? Nobody else is doing it. Let's do it. So one of my lovely team members, Riley, she's my partner in the ceramics market, and her background is event management. So together we're a really great team for putting that on. I couldn't do it, definitely couldn't do it all on my own, and she's got the skills to run the event. And I'm probably more connected with the ceramics community in Geelong because of this place. And I also really try and nurture that. You know, I put on classes that are like master classes that are aimed at people who are already operating as a ceramic artist and just want to keep upskilling. So the first year we had our ceramics market, it was one day, and we did it at Boom Gallery in their big boom. And it was just, we were totally blown away by how well it was received. It's always really hard to gauge those things. If you're going to have 10 people rock up or 1,000, like you just have no idea. We got some really great press coverage with the Addy and GT and Fort Magazine, a few of those, like Surf Coast Times. So the second year that we ran it, we did it over 2 days, just because a lot of people said like, oh, you open tomorrow as well. This was the first year. So we decided to run it for 2 days, and both days were just like absolutely pumping. It was just so busy. Always, you know, a couple of weeks before Christmas, it's great timing for everyone just to come and almost like a one-stop shop to come and get all their Christmas gifts. And it's really interesting that people kind of really spread their purchases. Like if you were one ceramic artist at a craft market, someone might come to you and say spend $200. But if at this ceramics market, people will be more like, oh, I'll buy a mug from you, and I'll buy a bowl from you, and I'll buy a vase from this person. And they kind of spread it a bit across the board, which is really nice.
And Little Creatures is a good spot to hold.
Little Creatures is going to be great, yeah. So this year we've got 23 ceramic artists, all from Geelong, Surf Coast Ballerine. We've got someone from Warrnambool, someone from Apollo Bay, Bacchus Marsh, and a couple from Melbourne, just to have good diversity.
What were the dates again, Bill? The
7th to the 8th of December, Little Creatures.
Little Creatures.
11
West
till
Fine
4
Street.
daily.
11 till 4 daily.
Yep.
Okay.
Little Creatures Brewery, that is.
Yeah, come and check it
So
out.
you can check that out and then go and have a beer.
Absolutely.
Afterwards.
I think it'll be like
So
almost a full day activity.
So with your material, is there a secret sauce in the clay you use?
So I purchased 2 different clays. One I get from South Australia, which is very from the ground. They mine it, they put it through probably a pug mill, and then they put it in bags. It's very organic. There can be like little rocks and things like that in it. But it's a really beautiful product to work with, and it's quite easy to work with because it's got that little bit of stone and grog in it. So that's a really good one for the students. And then I also buy one from Sydney that's more of like a man-made clay, so they would mix it all together rather than mining it directly out of the ground. And that one for me I use more for like tableware. It's a little bit more refined, a little bit more predictable.
And make your own glazes? What's the secret behind that?
So basically it's kind of like a recipe. It's like baking a cake. So you'll have your like key ingredients that you use for every glaze, and then you'll have different colorants. So if you wanted to make a blue glaze, you'd put cobalt in it. If you wanted to make a green glaze, you'd put copper in it, or you can use man-made stains as well. So kind of like mixing glazes is almost like if you have one base that you're happy with, you could actually make 100 different variants from that one base, just depending on the colorants that you put into it.
So Libby, how do people get in touch with you? What's your website?
So website is elizabethbellceramics.com. My Instagram is at elizabethbellceramics. Or they can come and visit me Tuesday to Sunday at the moment. We're opening Sundays just seasonally. And someone's here usually 10 till 3 every day, 10 till 4 during the week, but 10 till 3 on the weekends.
Mark,
and that's at the FyansPaper Mill.
FyansPaper Mill, yeah.
Mark, that's where I found the ceramic market on the Instagram account.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
That's brilliant, Libby.
Yeah.
Thank you. A fantastic story.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
story. And we interviewed the young entrepreneur of the week last week, and his word was brave.
Be brave.
Be brave.
And I think
And
that's
you
what
were
you've done.
brave.
Yeah.
And you took a chance. And good luck for the future with it.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind.
Thanks for the chat.
Thank you.